So today on the show, we're going to talk about what to do when a wholesale deal goes south. And I'm not talking about going to Florida. I'm talking about what do you do when a wholesale deal you think you're going to make 40 grand on gets squirrely for whatever reason might be. And there might be title issues. There might be buyers trying to snake you. You might have sellers trying to bail on you. We're going to cover this because this is something that people don't like to talk about because not that fun to talk about. So Michael, let's just start with you. I got a great story I'm going to share with an out-of-state property, but let's just get into like your experience because you've been doing this primarily in Long Island. So, I mean, that's a market where you got to know what you're doing. You can't be a noob. Oh, you can be a noob, but it's you got to work with someone like you to start. Shameless.
So a wholesale deal can go bad for a few reasons, right? It could be a title issue, which happens a lot. Sometimes a deal is not salvageable if there's a title problem that you didn't count on. Sometimes it goes bad because the seller gets wind of the fact that you are wholesaling it and you may not have told them. You're going to talk about a story that just happened to you about that. And sometimes it can go bad for other reasons. It could be a tenant issue, right? It's very often you'll buy a property and the seller will agree to provide it vacant, and then they think the tenant's going to leave and tenant doesn't leave. So there are all kinds of things that can happen. And as a wholesaler, you are really stuck in the middle on a lot of these situations, and people don't really understand that. Like a lot of the gurus out there say this is a risk-free, easy schmeezy situation where you're going to get this up, lock a deal up, find a buyer for it, collect your $20,000 checks, and while you're sitting on a beach. But the truth is a lot of things can go wrong once you have a property locked up and even after you have both sides locked up. So I'm going to talk about some kind of title issues that can show up. Greg, you just had a situation which is very interesting where another wholesaler or another investor sort of tried to screw you and the buyer found out about it and you had to talk them off a ledge. And then we can talk about other situations because these happen all the time. So I have a situation right now going on, which is a very good wholesale deal. It's a $70,000 deal. But one of the people on title is dead, and I'm buying the property from the other person. So let's talk about the roller coaster ride that happened. So I thought that both people on title were married to each other. Now, the way it works in most states, certainly in New York, is if a spouse dies, the other spouse automatically inherits them. So the fact
Even if they're not on the deed?
No, I'm saying if they're both on the deed, right?
Yeah.
So we two people on the deed who I knew were married at some point. And one I know passed away. What I thought is they were married when she passed away, but then I found out they were divorced for 30 years before she died. So I immediately thought we're in big trouble because I know she has children from another party, not just the person who's the seller is selling it to me, and they might be heirs. And these are the kinds of things that get complicated. Not that situation is not salvageable. If there's $70,000 of spread on it, you sometimes can go to the heirs and offer them money. And sometimes they'll take it, right? There's a property, you're entitled to some money, but would you take $5,000 and walk away? Sometimes they don't even know about the property. There are ways around it, but sometimes it's a deal killer, right? Because they look at the numbers and they're like, somebody's taking advantage of me and I'm not going to sign off on it. In my situation, I was blessed by the Lord in that they took title not as husband and wife, but as joint tenants. Now, I remember I had to take many tests where I had to know the difference between joint tenants and tenants in common. I don't remember what they were, but I do know now that if you take title with another party as joint tenants, and literally on the deed it was written with a little arrow, it says as joint tenants or joint tenants, and it's almost like they were married. And my seller automatically inherited the person, his ex-wife who had died. So I'm okay. The problem, of course, is that he didn't know where she was. She passed away, and the title company now wants, and rightfully so, proof that she's dead. They want a death certificate. And we had attorneys working on finding this in the area where the house is located, and we had no luck. And finally, I did some skip tracing. I found that she lived in South Carolina for a while, and we found that thank God for us, she died in Charleston, and we can get a death certificate. Of course, taken us 3 weeks to get a death certificate for them. And at this point, I may literally book a ticket for the seller to fly to Charleston to go pick up a physical death certificate.
Where's the seller?
Sells in Louisiana. So I might do that. But that's the kind of thing sometimes you have to do, right? So this was a deal where I thought it was great. Then I thought it was gone, zero. Now I think it's great again. And now there's a glitch. So things like this happen all the time, right? Now there are people like us that hire someone called a transaction coordinator, which is a person whose job it is just to get a deal from contract to closing. Sometimes on both sides, from seller to you, from you to the buyer, to the cash buyer. But in New York, really, because we have attorneys, they take a lot of that bulk up. They do a lot of that. At least they're supposed to. If you have a good attorney, they should do a lot of that transaction coordination. There was a time where I thought I might hire a transaction coordinator because I had so many deals that are just languishing, and I thought if somebody was there just to pester people, it might work. Also, I had a lot of properties that were, and I still have it now, where I have tenants in them, which we could talk about later. And I want someone just to pester them, like, are you getting out of there? Like, they're supposed to leave. You're not leaving, but what's the story? I have a bunch of evictions going on. And I just got a call today. Of course, Monday is Jewish holiday. I got a call today that I have an eviction scheduled on Monday. I had to push it off because I have to show up there and pay everybody, pay the moving company. So I had to push it. But there's a lot that goes on between when you get it locked up and when it actually closes. And these are things that happen all the time. You need to be prepared for them. You need to know how to deal with them. Sometimes they can be fixed. Sometimes they can't.
Yeah, no. And this is what people don't like to talk about because, it's in theory, you find a desperate seller, motivated, reasonable seller, whatever you want to say. You find a cash buyer who's licking his lips for a deal, like meat and a steak. You put them together and, you buy your yacht. But at the end of the day, especially, I say this, especially in our area or any really competitive area, or an area where there's high value of properties, this stuff's going to happen more often, than not. And at the end of the day, I've found, you mentioned your title issue thing. And, I had basically my business like 3 years ago was like, I was like a private investigator. I would just locate these jacked up houses and I would find the heirs and I would take these heirship affidavits to the attorney or title company and we would get these big deals done. And, that still happens from now. We have another one right now, actually up in Dutchess that's like jammed up because there's like a probate issue. But, the title issue is the main thing, that stuff and in New York, I was telling this, I did my webinar yesterday and I was like, listen, cash conversion cycle in New York is garbage. When you have title issues, it's garbage times two. I mean, you have all this pipeline revenue and it's not actualized, right? Because it's sitting in the attorney's office. So you need to understand that is a reality of this business, especially when you're buying distressed properties from distressed sellers. I mean, they're normally going to have title issues for a reason, right? So here's another thing that can happen that this is not as common as a title issue, but I'll share a quick story. I'm not going to mention any names or anything. I'm going to say this was an area that was not in New York. I'm not going to disclose the state in case someone's listening, but this actually just happened. We got a house after going on 2 appointments. Brett on my team locked it up at a really good price that worked for everyone. We put it out to our database for a nice profit. And I actually did the Robert Wensley. I did a buy it now and I got 15K over the buy it now, or no, 10K over the buy it now. Sorry, I got 10,000 over the buy it now because I had multiple offers at the buy it now. And I'm like, brother, supply and demand. So we got this thing assigned. Great deal. And I'm doing a webinar. This is yesterday. I'm doing a webinar and my phone is nowhere. Like I'm not touching my phone. I got, 20 people who paid me on the phone. Like I'm not going to do that. I look at my phone after this webinar and I get a call from Brett, another missed call. Yo, we're screwed on XYZ property. Call me. And I'm like, what the hell? I call and I'm much calmer than I used to be. Hey, what's up, bro? How you doing? Dude, this dude, investor is trying to he sent the email to this. So what happened was this investor on my list, will go unnamed, took an email from me and sent it to the seller. And the email was my property advertised that was their property, marked up quite handsome profit. And there was some Dan Kennedy copywriting there that may have persuaded someone to take action because I may have done that once or twice. And the seller calls up Brett, goes bananas on him, like crazy on Brett. And Brett's just like, because he just deals with the acquisitions.
What is the seller? Give an example of what the seller was saying to Brett.
Seller goes, oh my gosh, some other buyer who I was talking to sent me this email and it looks like there's meat on the bone. You guys are, bunch of, crooks and this, that. And I'm like, and I'm still calm. I'm not yelling. I'm not raising my voice. There's I used to do that and it serves no purpose. So I'm like, okay, we come up with solutions. We don't escalate problems. I said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to find out who this jerky is, as you would say. We are going to call the owner and we're going to work this out. So I get the jerky on the phone I get him to say his case. It was complete BS. So we ended up just saying like, okay, the objective of that call was to see what was going on. The end result was he told me he wasn't going to communicate with the seller anymore. And I said, fair. So then we call the seller. Seller doesn't answer. I said, listen, it's like 8 o'clock at night. We're going to take off for the night because there's no need to call these people after 8 o'clock. So I call him this morning, or maybe
By the way, sometimes it's also better to wait for them to calm down a little bit.
Yeah, for them to de-escalate. So we call it, we get him back on the phone, and I had my Chris Voss hat on, New York Jets hat, and hey, they're doing good this year. And I pretty much everything I've learned up to this time about like empathy and negotiating and seeing stuff from someone else's side, I put my best stuff together. And I wish I recorded that call. But anyway, we got the seller off the ledge. We got them to
Why don't you summarize what you said to the seller?
Okay.
Because you
basically
told me
I said, well, I this is how I went into this call with a very with high intentions on how I wanted to frame it, because I really had one shot to do this, or else it was going to go down the drain. I said, listen, the first thing I wanted to cover, and I'll explain how I did it. I said, I want to confront the truth. Like, I'm not going to deviate from what happened, because if you dance around the root cause, it tends to not get solved. So I said, listen, our intention is to help you. Our second intention is to make a profit on this house. These are the two ways we make a profit. We buy homes, fix them up, and resell them. Sometimes when we have a lot of inventory, we will simply sell the home to another investor for a profit off the bat. But either way, Mr. Prospect, Mr. Seller, we were going to close on this house, whether we sold it to an investor or not. And if we were just going to try to sell this to an investor, you would have known that in advance. And Brett, that's part of our process. If we're only going to wholesale it, we tell them. If we're going to buy it, no matter what, we just go forward and we wholesale it if we want. If we don't want to wholesale it, we buy it. So I told them the truth. And I said, listen, we're getting a good price. You agreed to the price, and we're making a profit. Is that correct? And he agreed to me. I said, if I were in your shoes, this is where the empathy. So then the second thing I did was I met the seller from where they were, not where they are, because they were in a bad spot yesterday. I said, if I was in your shoes, I totally get why you'd feel like you got ripped off. You saw the house advertised for X. We agreed to buy the house for Y. And the fact that I said there was meat on the bone doesn't make you feel like a smart person. And I get why you feel that way. And I apologize for communicating that message to my audience. I apologize for that. And I get you feel like you got taken advantage of. And if I was in your shoes, I would probably feel the same way. And that's true, because if I was an 85-year-old seller, of course I'd feel that way. I said, and so I dealt with the truth, confronted the seller, and I acknowledged their feelings. And then I communicated that we are taking a next step by moving this deal to the finish line. I said, it's our obligation to get you from this property up to your new property in the easiest process possible. So going forward, you have my word, there's going to be no shenanigans. There's going to be no BS. I guarantee you we're going to close. And then I threw in some humor at the end. You always want to end a tough negotiation like that with humor. So I made a little relevant joke up that was, pertaining their situation. I got them to laugh. Brett ended up going back to the property, meeting them in the flesh again to make sure we calmed everything down. They appreciated the visit, and now we're back on track. But here's the big takeaway if you want to implement this. This will happen to you. Okay, I have another story I can tell you about this actually happening in New York. And actually, I want to tell that story, so remind me. But you need to deal with these kind of problems like a rational, calm human being. I wouldn't advise acting like Michael when a squatter's involved in this. I would not advise that, right? We've done shows on that. He's an expert.
I would not advise it either.
I really want to hire your services soon. But anyway,
One of our mutual friends who was on the webinar asked me if I can come help him with a squatter situation.
Oh, yeah? Oh, gosh. Tell me offline who that was. I'd love to hear that. But so you got to deal with this like a calm, normal person. And I'll be very blunt with the audience right now. If this was me 2 years ago, I would have been screaming. I would have been yelling. I would have been threatening. I would have been, my ego would have taken front seat. My emotions would have gotten the best of me. And I would have probably made this deal go bye-bye by being an ego-driven lunatic loaded with testosterone in my house by myself, with no one around me screaming. I do not know. I no longer participate in that behavior, Michael. So that's good news. So you got to handle this like a normal, calm, rational person, because if you start speaking up to people, they're going to match you, right? The jerk's going to match you. The seller's going to match you, and the productive outcome.
People get defensive right away.
Yeah, it's going to go right down the drain. So you never want to confront people and call them out. You want to acknowledge what they did and then ask them why they did that, right? That's like a big way to communicate if you want to have productive results. So you have to act like a calm, rational person. You have to get the facts on the table and then discuss a solution. I just rambled there for 10 minutes. So what
No, that was good. I think it's a great story, but you said there was another story in New York where something similar.
Oh yeah. Okay. Here's another one. This one, same deal. So actually this is a better story actually. So this actually wasn't that long ago. This was like 3 months ago. So we got a property from an online channel and the owner was really motivated. And this is actually in Pleasant Valley. I can say that. So it was up in Pleasant Valley, good area. And we looked at the deal and Brett was dealing with the seller and I was looking at the property and I was kind of like, dude, I don't know if I want to buy this thing. It's a little tight, but I think we could wholesale it and we'd probably make like, 15, 20 grand and just assign it over to someone. So we determined that we were not going to close on this property. So our only offer to the seller was we want to tie it up on an option, have the ability to market the property, find a buyer within 5 days or bail. So I set the expectations with Brett and he set the expectations with the seller. We're going to only wholesale your house. If you want this price, we need our terms and we're going to see where this is in 5 days. And he acknowledged that. He was happy as a clam, signed the paperwork right away. No resistance. By the way, this seller was an attorney. Guy was an attorney, smart guy, not a dummy. So we put the property out to our big, massive list in New York. And there's another gentleman. I want to call him out, but I won't because I got to stick to my word and saying I'm a calm, rational guy. Anyway, this jerky, his name starts with a B. He gets wind of my email. Yeah, you might not know him, but he gets wind of my email because he was competing with me on the property. There was multiple investors fighting for this thing. And because we were really transparent with the seller, he liked that and he decided to go with our proposal. So this jerk sends the email right to the seller, similar to my story I just told. The seller calls, he actually called me, the seller, and he said, hey, I saw my property advertised for a profit. And I said, yeah, that's exactly what I told you to do, that I was doing. He's like,
were we clear about this?
Yeah. He goes, oh yeah, no, it's fine. I just figured I'd let you know. I said, by the way, who sent you that email? He goes, oh, blah, 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 blah. And I said, oh, okay. Got it. Thanks.
Letting me know.
I get right on my computer. I type this guy and I find him right away. I start texting people. Hey, do you know this guy? You know this guy? Do you know this guy? I call the guy, doesn't answer my calls for a while because he's being a coward. I said, listen, I'm not going to yell at you. I'm not going to scream at you. I just want to have a conversation about what happened with this property. And he was like, oh, I mean, I was kind of talking to the seller and we like kind of had a deal. And then I guess he sold it to you. He was just giving me this like loosey-goosey. I said, listen, I get it, man. It's a tough world out there. But listen, we have an agreement with the seller. We're going to go forward on an agreement. And that's the bottom line. So I don't appreciate you reaching out to the seller. I wouldn't do that if you had it under contract. If you sent me an email, I would assume you had it under contract. Therefore, I'm going to back away. And if we were competing and you won and I lost, I'm cool with that. That's fine. But just don't do that again. I don't appreciate that. I wish you the best of luck. Very cordial. I don't care if that guy likes me or not. If I saw him in person, I'd probably not say hi to him. I'd probably be like, loser. But, that happens. You got to act like a normal, sane person. Or else.
By the way, no, I think there's more. It's not just normal, sane person. You are acting like a professional and
Yes.
They are acting unprofessionally.
Correct.
It is unprofessional to be such a sore loser when you don't get a deal that you want to then hurt the guy who did get the deal. It's just unprofessional. It never makes you look better. You, in both situations, look like the professional, and these guys acted unprofessionally. So I think and I think it's very hard when you're starting in this business and you don't know, and you're counting on each deal, and then the deal you think is a lock, someone else throws out there. It's happened to both of us, I'm sure. It's happened to me dozens of times. It happens, right? I didn't get the deal. Someone else got it. I never in a million years would think, oh, I'm going to screw that guy so that I can end up getting the deal. What are the chances of that happening? What are the chances of me telling the seller, that guy's trying to sell it at a profit, so therefore sell it to me? Never going to happen.
It blows your credibility right out the window. You look like a total knucklehead doing that.
You seem unprofessional is what you are.
Yeah.
And
you sound desperate. You honestly sound desperate when you do that. You sound like a complete desperate person.
100%.
And by the way, the guy in New York is probably 50 years old, and I am half his age. I could technically be his kid. And I mean, honestly, he acted like a 22-year-old, in this scenario, and I was disappointed by it.
I think we both know older people, although I am over 52, who are extremely unprofessional in anything they do. So that's the way it goes. It's what it is. So let me talk about another title issue that I'm actually going through right now. So I have a deal, very good deal, very good area.
What area are we talking here?
It is in East Meadow, New York. Very highly sought after.
Nassau County, baby.
Nassau County. And seller actually came through one of my students. So it's joint venture deal with one of my students. And seller, we agree on a price. I put it out to the list. I get tremendous amount of activity. I probably got 20 offers on it. And
good for you.
settle on an offer. We're all ready to go. Buyer still wants to close. And then we find out that it's in probate in North Carolina.
Oh, what's up with you in the Carolinas, man?
I don't know. And the person who signed the contract with us was not the PR, the personal representative. In New York, we call that an executor, an executrix. Yeah. But it had never been probated, so there was no personal representative assigned by the surrogates court there. So that now we're 2 months later, we still don't have a PR, a personal representative assigned. I think we're going to get the deal. I think it's going to happen, but it's like, the buyer's upset. He wanted to close, but these are the kinds of things that happen. You just have to, you got to suck it up. We had no idea what status the probate was in. Maybe we should have asked, but we were told, actually the person who signed the contract told us that she was the personal representative. So I'm like, great, then I think she has every right to do it. But I think she's got some mental issues. So we're talking to a sister, I think, who is going to be appointed the personal representative of the estate, hopefully very soon, and then we can close on the deal. Like, these are the kind of things that happen. There's no way to avoid them. Hopefully the deal ends up closing, but sometimes a title issue can kill the deal, right? In theory, if another person was appointed the personal representative who didn't want to sell the property to us, the contract we have is completely invalid.
Yeah,
so,
it's normal. It happens. It's part of the game, and the thing with title issues that I've realized is that, at least in New York, they can get kind of complicated because there's heirs and stuff. So you have to deal with title issues one step at a time. So anytime I'm working on a title issue with an attorney, I'm like, listen, what's the next step we got to take? Because obviously there might be 4 or 5 steps. What is the next step? Is it a telephone call to the court? Is it a telephone call to a sibling? Is it, there's always one step you got to take. And then when you take that step and you achieve that step, you take the next step. And with your case, it's frustrating because especially when you have a big fat deal on the line and you got a $70,000 payday at the end of the rainbow, you're future pacing that, oh, what can I do with that money? I can put it back into marketing. I can buy my yacht, whatever. And you're like, oh my gosh, if this goes away. So here's a takeaway for everyone.
The deposit of my yacht is only good for another 2 months.
I got to get an extension, an affidavit, addendum. So here's how you got to look at this business too. And I learned this from Todd Toback, who's a great trainer out there. He says, if you don't want to be desperate, you have to always get leads, right? If you have a consistent stream of leads and opportunities coming in, listen, you're going to want to close the deals you have. You're not just going to neglect stuff when there's any obstacles or resistance. But if you have enough leads coming into your business where you have a predictable pipeline, you're going to have a better stomach for this kind of stuff. So the big rub I see with people, at least new people, is that they really struggle to get leads, whether that's a time thing or a money thing. And every opportunity they get, they're hugging it like it's
they're married. They get married to a property.
Yeah, they get married. Literally, they get married to a property.
I remember when I started, I was married.
There, man.
But the point is, and when I was there, even this was like 10 years ago, I said, I have to get to a point in my business where if a deal doesn't close, that there's another deal behind it, right?
Yes.
That's part of what you want to get to. And I remember when I had private lenders also, and I had a private lender call me and said, I'm getting divorced. I need my money back. I got to have a heart attack. You got to get yourself to a point where you have enough private lenders that if one of them leaves or 2 of them leaves, you're still okay. And it's the same thing with deals in your pipeline. You have to get to a point, and it's not going to happen right away, but you got to get to a point where you can't be married to a deal, where if a deal dies because of something out of your control, if the deal dies because of something in your control, then you really got to evaluate how you screwed up. Yeah. But if a deal dies because of a title issue that's out of your control, you can't be crying. You can't be, you have to have enough deals in your pipeline that you can live with that.
You got to move on. You got to move on. You got to move on. You got to be willing to, and it's interesting you say that because it's ironic because we had a property in Connecticut. This was earlier in the week. SEO lead, smoking hot. I looked at.
What'd you say? STO?
SEO. Google lead. SEO. The thing comes in, guy's asking $100,000 below the as-is value. And I'm like, whoa. And Brett's like, dude, we got to get this thing. I'm like, oh, it's in Bridgeport, not in the hood. I'm like, it's no squatters. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're going to rip this thing. We're going to make so much money. Oh my goodness. So we go through the sales process and we're like, this is our price. The guy committed to selling verbally. In Connecticut, you can sign a contract up on the spot. We had the DocuSign ready to go. Brett gave him 17 commitments. He's like, yes, 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 yes. We send the agreement over. He says, I'm going to list my house on the market with a realtor. And we covered that, or he covered that right at the beginning of the call. I don't want to list it. I don't want to list it. Speaks to his sister. His sister's like, you got to list it. He puts it on the, that. And I said, listen, Brett, you did everything you had control over. They're not your fault at all. It's the seller's fault, not yours. I said, watch this, bro. We're going to have another deal come right around the corner. And guess what came right around the corner? A $35K deal 2 days later. That's what happens if you have enough leads, right? Easier said than done, but you have to have that mindset, because and even when you're negotiating, like if you don't, I just was on the phone with a guy. I'm like, listen, I want to buy your house, Fred, but if you want to shop around, I get why you want to do that. I'm not going to force you to sell me your house, but hopefully you notice me following up with you for 2 years. I'm pretty serious about buying it, obviously. But if you want to sell to someone else, that's totally fine. You know why? Because it's all good.
And that's why you probably have the best shot of buying that, because every other person he's talking to is going to be like, what are you going to sign? When are you going to sign? Sell me your house. Sell me your house. Sell me your house. Hitting him over the head. And that's just such a negative experience. But the person, when we talk about that in sales training, we talk about it a few times, but when you have the confidence to tell a seller, if this is not right for you, then I don't want to do business with you. It's very different than what they're hearing from a lot of other people. And from when they hear it from other people, I'm going to sell, you got to sell me right away. It turns them off. So
it turns them off big time. You know what I've realized too on that note that works for us to like kind of get the best of both worlds is we just ask for a firm commitment at a reasonable date. We're like, listen, and I just discovered this week actually. So we have a house that we're trying to buy. It's in foreclosure. It's a little hairy. And I'm like thinking now, I'm like, because Brett's asking me what to do next. And I'm like thinking about it. And I said, you know what we should do? We should verbalize what's probably going to happen and let the seller decide what they want to do. So I said, Brett, you should say this. Hey, typically at this point, what happens is the communication tends to kind of fade off. It's a little harder to get in touch with each other for whatever reason that might be. And if this is something you wanted to do, we had a great conversation on the first call. Generally after this, it can get a little, get a little kind of loose. So we're obviously not pressuring you to sell us your house if you don't think it's a fit. If you want to shop it around, that's totally fine. We just want to kind of know, within the next couple of weeks, if this is something you want to do, we could at least set up a phone call to make that decision, whether that's a yes or a no. And that way, you'd be selling. We know we're buying. We can make sure we have the resources available to close on your property. Because the truth is we are looking at a couple other properties, which is not a lie. And we figured that's probably the best way to go about this, Mrs. Seller. You think that sounds fair? And we've saw that actually to get pretty good results. When you want to kind of tighten the deadline bolt a little bit, but you don't want to be like, sell me your house, sell me your house, sell me your house. You kind of acknowledge what's going to happen and then you go forward with that.
You make an appointment for the next call. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. We'll just go with a simple commitment. Yes or no. Or my favorite is I learned this from Todd. Oh, go ahead.
No, don't forget about Todd, but I'm saying you've given them permission to say no. That's the best part of it. Right.
It's huge.
The answer is no, it's okay. No is okay. Yes, it's okay. I don't want a maybe, but I want what yes or no.
Yeah, no is fine. A no is because if we're going to get a no in 3 months, I'd rather get a no now, right? Versus waiting down, following up with you.
What were you saying you got from Todd?
So the biggest thing I've learned from Todd, and I really speak highly of him. If he's listening, Todd, you're the man. Is he talks a lot about getting commitments from sellers, right? And that's something that once we started implementing, it has really helped us get deals done shorter than we thought. Because
what do you mean? What do you mean when you say
a commitment is just a decision on, are we going to do business or are we not going to do business? We were a little loose with that before we started really listening to Todd. And it was like, we had all these deals we thought we were going to get, and we did like this yes or no thing. And it just wasn't really flying that well. But once we started making it a point just to ultimately get to a decision one way or the other.
But when do you do that? Do you make the commitment to make another phone call where you're going to make them commit, or like when do you make them?
We usually, what we've been doing recently is we do a phone call where they're going to decide yes or no, and there's no pressure. But that way they know when the next call happens, the objective is to just get to a decision one way or the other. And they know that we're not going to pressure them. But I think when you're setting phone calls up, whether you're doing this yourself or you have a team, or you're going on appointments. I mean, you generally do this on the phone if you've already seen the house. You just say, listen, if you want to sell, we want to make sure we have everything we need to buy. So all we ask for, if you think it's fair, and you always want to make it about them. If you think it's okay, if you think it's cool, next time we get on the phone on Tuesday at 3, if we could just figure out whether you want to sell us the house or not, we're not going to ask for a yes, but we're just going to ask for a decision one way or the other. Does that sound like something we could agree to? And it sounds a little salesy, I'll be honest with you, but it does work. And it's interesting because
It's not sales.
It's an agreeable ask. It's a
The
reasonable
reason why
ask.
it's not salesy is because it could be a no, and that's fine. And
Yeah, yeah.
giving them permission to say no is all the difference in the world from being someone who's just, harassing them.
You know what? Because if you give somebody permission to say no, they can actually think about the decision on if they actually want to do it or not, because they don't feel obligated to say yes. But if they only feel obligated to say yes, they're going to say no by default.
That's 100% right. That's the truth. That is the truth.
Truth.
That's why when we go to a used car lot and we need a used car that day and we're desperate for a car and a salesman comes over and says, "Can I help you?" and you say, "Just looking," it's because you're afraid you're going to get pressure to say yes, even though that guy could be the one guy that can help you get what you want. You're not going to be honest with him. If he goes, "Listen, if you don't want to buy, that's fine," then maybe you'll say, "Okay, help me out." Now I'm looking.
I'm looking. Yeah, exactly. It's just human psychology. The more you study human behavior and how people think, and then how you can communicate to them to get them to behave a certain way, it's like a license to print money. You got to know marketing first. If you know marketing, you got to get people in the door. But once you got people in the door, you got this communication skill, you can basically write your own check. So covered a lot of ground today. I know, Mike, it's we're both in California. It's 2:00, but I know you probably got better things to do. So I hope everyone did get value from this episode. If you did, please share it online and leave us a review. We're going to keep more of these episodes coming. And until next time, we'll catch everyone on the next episode.